Well, welcome to the special edition of the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast. I'm your host, Alan Hall, along with my great co-host, Rosemary Barnes, who is just back, fresh back from the Australia Wind Energy 2024 conference in, of all places, Melbourne, Australia. And Rosemary and I were just talking offline about some of the proceedings and the events that happened in Melbourne. And I thought it'd be a good discussion to get out into the greater Uptime audience. So, Rosemary, first off, welcome back. And can you give us just a couple of just top level what was going on in Australia at this wind energy conference?
Yeah, it was actually really, really focused on offshore wind this time. Like I would say 2/3, 3/4, maybe more of the sessions were like explicitly about offshore wind, it seemed. And when it wasn't explicitly about it, then people were trying to shoehorn it in, which on the one hand makes sense because that's the, next big exciting thing coming. But on the other hand, we have literally zero offshore wind currently, and we have many things that could be improved with our current onshore wind rollout. So I did think that it was a bit unbalanced in that way. This conference, I mean, it was amazing in terms of like everybody shows up to it. So, I think I was just back to back meetings the entire time, really targeted at all the people that I wanted to talk to for, the various projects that I've got going on. So in that sense, it was incredibly successful and had a great time. But yeah, when I did find the time to step into some of the presentations, which is what you pay for after all, it's $1,500 for 2 days. And yeah, the sessions that I went to, they're just getting worse and worse. It feels less and less like anybody cares what the experience is like for the attendees, what they might be hoping to get out of it. And it's just purely about extracting money from from everybody, extract money from the exhibitors, extract money from the sponsors, extract money from the keynote speakers. People don't realize that the keynote speakers they're all paying to stand up there and speak to you, like a lot. Pretty significant amount. And some of them are good, but you don't know ahead of time. And for the most part, people pay their 10 grand or whatever it is and stand up there and give you a sales pitch. And, that's not valuable to the majority of the audience. Another complaint just on the panel discussions, the panels are just way too big. You have a panel with like 10 different people on it. You spend half of the session just introducing everybody, and then they've got to give their little pitch about their company because, they've got to get something out of it. And then, there's too many people to have an actual discussion, usually not many or maybe not any questions from the audience, certainly not addressed in a meaningful way. And you have sessions like a session on, it sounds like it should be interesting, session on supply chain challenges. There's a huge challenge for wind everywhere in the world at the moment, including Australia. And you have an hour-long session and they mention the word supply chain, but it's just kind of like, oh yeah, and obviously supply chain is an issue, and then, move on to talk about something else. And
let me ask you about that because I've been to a number of conferences this year, and I don't want to name the ones I've been to specifically, but the attendance in the discussions was quite small, typically, unless it was a technical subject, something that people were having problems with out in the field. A couple I remember from this year or last year was like concrete foundations and problems with concrete foundations on turbines, right? That's a big issue. Another one was lightning damage or qualification of damage to blades and trying to quantify what's Cat 1 versus Cat 5, create an industry standard. That was well attended. But some of these that are policy driven or politically driven discussions are just not well attended. Is that the same thing you're seeing on Australia?
yeah, it's actually interesting that you should mention foundations, because that was the sole good keynote that I saw was a guy from Total Ground Engineering who has he presented some very compelling information about why the current standards for foundations are becoming less and less appropriate as the turbines get bigger, and presented some innovative solutions towards that. So that was a win. That was probably the sole interesting thing that I actually learned from sitting in the audience. And you're right that they're not very well attended, because probably everyone is thinking the same thing as me, that this is not the point of the conference anymore. The point is that people that you meet And yeah, early, like a few years ago when I moved back to Australia and I found myself with like no network in the Australian wind industry. So I went to conferences and, I needed to kind of randomly chat to people and bump into people and pull people aside after a presentation to talk to them. But this time, every single conversation I had gotten in touch with them. Either I already knew them or I had, planned out ahead of time and got in touch on LinkedIn. So yeah, I'd say that like the last bit of value that's left at the conferences that they're being run is the app that they have where you can actually search by company, see who's going to be there from the different companies, and then you figure out who you want to talk to and send them a message. They also had like a semi-cool feature where you can send a meeting request, and if you put your availability in the calendar, then it will hook you up and you go into this room. It had like a real speed dating vibe about it. Everyone's just kind of like awkwardly looking around for who they're supposed to be meeting, and then it was kind of funny, but that's actually useful. But it is becoming pretty hard to justify the price. And I don't know. It's been years since I went to a European conference, so maybe they're following this same business model as the Australian and American ones now. But the last one I went to in Europe, it was really about the information. That they had people presenting, and they would ask people to talk because they thought they had something interesting to say, not because they wanted them to pay a lot of money to get up there and talk. So I just really think that they've got to rein it in a little bit, like get at least keep your panels of a moderate size. I mean, I know you've got to let every sponsor have a spot on a panel, but like keep it at a size that where it's possible to have some sort of interesting communication happening. Get a moderator that actually knows how to moderate with the audience in mind. Think, okay, given the session title and the participants, what are the audience going to want out of this? And then keep people on track. Don't allow it to become just like a sales brochure, a verbal sales brochure for their company. Talk about the things that people are hoping to learn about. Otherwise, I mean, are people going to keep on going? Maybe it's irrelevant, but I would have thought that exhibitors are only paying because the number of people that come through the door, and the same with the sponsors of the conference. They're not going to want to sponsor, like $10,000 keynote that has 3 people in the audience attending. They could better spend that money on sponsoring social media content instead and get a much wider viewership, listenership.
Well, let me ask you why you think this is, because I have a couple of thoughts, and I'm going to throw some at the wall here, and you tell me what sticks. First is that they choose conference venues that are super exclusive / expensive, like overly done. And so those conference places cost an enormous sum of money to book, to hold, and to make up some money on as a conference exhibitor or a conference holder. The economics are not in your favor when you do that. It used to be when we held conferences. I've been to a lot of Holiday Inn, Ramada kind of conferences in the United States. A lot less expensive, more attendance, just because the entrance fee went down. The hotel wasn't as expensive. I think because you mentioned the $1,500 to attend. There's a reason why that is. Was it in one of those fancy Melbourne hotels or conference centers?
Yeah, it's in the Melbourne Convention Centre, which they always are. They're all there, and I mean it's fine, it's nice, but it's also expensive. You want to stay close, so then your accommodation is expensive too.
See, that doesn't help the attendees. So if you want people like Rosemary and me to attend, you need to be usually a notch down from that, generally speaking, because $1,500 is $1,500. It is real money. That if we're a small business, both of us run small businesses, our own business, $1,500 comes right out of our pocket, and it better be worth it. And what Rosemary's saying, and I think what I'm saying is, it's not worth. Some of these conferences are not worth it right now.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the time cost as well. So, I mean, everybody's the same. And actually, I did meet up with a few people that are like, oh my God, did you buy a delegate's pass? Why would you do that? Like, it's obviously you only need the exhibition pass. And I'm like, Yeah, okay. I'm starting to come around to that, but I do think that for $1,500, if you had good sessions, it should be allowing you to kind of put your finger on the pulse and figure out, what's the vibe of wind energy in Australia at the moment. What are the big problems people are having, and then some potential solutions. Some people talking about things that are coming up that you might not have heard about yet. I do think that there's a lot of value in that, but they're not trying to get good speakers, and not trying to make it good for attendees. And I just think like surely it can't continue much longer of this, because it's worse and worse every year.
So let me ask you about this. The second question I had about attending. Is it because the speakers are less technical, more salesy, more executive office people, rather than frontline, uh, direct hands-on knowledge of what other expertise is, be it blaze, be it nacelles, generators, whatever, that it then draws less of a crowd? Because then you do think, yeah, I'm going to see an executive vice president for this large operator. It's maybe interesting, but I'm not going to take anything really out of this.
Yeah, and because they're just giving the same talking points that they give. Yeah, the higher level, the less interesting probably, or less surprising what they have to say is going to be. I think personally, yes, I prefer the European conferences that I used to go to did tend to be a lot more technical, and I personally like that. But I've also been to some that are more based at a higher level, industry in general, because even though I'm a really technical person, I still need to know what's happening in the industry here. And in Australia, no one's designing wind turbines in Australia. We're buying them and installing them, and I still need to know, oh, what's the problem this year? Is it community acceptance of new wind farms? Is it getting enough cranes on site? Is it transmission? Is it like lightning damage causing problems on sites, or anything like that? Like I still want to kind of like get my finger on the pulse. That's a big part of why I would go to a conference like that. And we did get that to a certain extent in this conference, but very very little. And even this same conference a few years ago was better. It still annoyed me at the time, but
Do you think these exhibits and conferences need a steering committee to help guide them as to what would be important topics to discuss? I feel like we're missing that right now.
I think with this particular conference, it's not. It's an international conference organization group. They're not Australian, and I think that it shows that they are not really. Like conferences are nicer. Like if I think of, for example, one conference I used to go to a lot in Europe was Winter Wind, and it's about like wind turbines in cold climates. Have you been?
Yes, I have.
The organizers were all from the Nordics. They really cared about making sure that wind energy was suitable for these cold climates, and that the technologies were improving. And like they started the conference because they wanted to improve knowledge and improve the the state of the industry in that niche. And so like it kind of permeates through the whole thing. They invite speakers who they've because they're like involved in the field, and they're paying attention all year round to who's saying what, and then they'll pick out, oh, this person has something really interesting to say, let's invite them to be a keynote speaker. And it's just a totally different experience. And I can't even recall the cost of it. It's not like it was a cheap conference. It wasn't in a shoddy venue or anything like that. There were all these in beautiful places. One time I went to one at Aura. Actually, you went to one at Aura too, I remember saying. Yeah, so like a Swedish ski resort. The conference venue has saunas on the bottom floor, and so it's not, they're not cutting corners on that aspect of the conference junket. But the value that you get, if you want to know, if you're entering that kind of part of the industry that you need to know about, what matters in cold climate wind, you're guaranteed to find that out there. And if you go year after year, you are guaranteed to find out, what has the progress been, and to meet relevant people and everything. So I just think that it's much easier to get a good value conference from a small organization that is really dedicated to the topic of the conference. We need someone within the Australian wind industry to start up a better conference. And
Well, do you think that the attendees are mostly technical people or salespeople, or is it sort of a 50-50 mix there?
there's so few technical people in Australia. Like it's just the industry is not technical here, if that makes sense. Not nearly to the definitely not to the extent of Europe, and not even nearly to the extent of the US. So you never hear people like that presenting.
Because I think that was the key to Winter Wind. The last time I attended, it was focus on this problem. Let's hear some solutions to this problem. Let's try to understand the problem a little bit better. Here are some possible ways to address this problem. It's with these solutions. So it was a problem-solving session, and I think you were right.
Yeah, and they come in from all different sides as well, because they'll have I was there representing LM Wind Power, and so I didn't even present every year because you didn't always have something new to say, but you are basically doing the company line, giving us the sales brochure in presentation format. So those sessions were usually a bit boring. But then they would also invite people who were operating wind farms, and they'd be like, "Oh, we have brand X turbines, and their icing system sucks. Look at all the different ways that it sucks. This is all the ways that it broke." And it's so valuable, that information, because obviously no one, the manufacturer of that system is not going to broadcast that knowledge. But that's how the industry can improve, and what problems there are, then many people can step in to solve them. So
Isn't it fun when you see a contrarian point of view at these conferences too? Like you see the OEMs and they have a certain sort of cadence to them, and they're pretty similar. And then you get this one rogue scientist or engineers that comes in and just goes, "I've worked out in the field. I've used these components. They're terrible. Here's why, and this is what we should be doing about it." Like those sort of discussions kind of set the tone for the conference, I think, in terms of how good you feel about when you leave them. Like, oh, something happened. It may not have been, I may not agree with this person, but at least I now am thinking about this problem in a wider context, and that it helps move the industry forward. Did you feel like the industry moved forward after you finished the conference in Australia?
no, and I don't recall hearing a rogue voice either.
Yeah, I think that's the issue, right? Is that we need a Rosemary on the panel to go, that's garbage, and here's why, and this is what we should be doing about it. That gets the discussion going, gets the blood flowing, gets people into seats. That kind of discussion.
Like they mentioned supply chain, they mentioned transmission, but they're not really there's no. I didn't hear anything new, any new ideas for solving that, anything that I feel would really give people the knowledge and the drive that they need to go out and make things happen in those spaces. So I think it's a wasted opportunity.
All right, so how do we make these conferences better?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is that just choosing which ones to go to, and then the organizers of those conferences should be making sure that they are focused on what the attendees are getting out of it, and that probably means picking good keynote speakers based on what they have to say, rather than what their their job title is, how high up their job title is, and also when you're going to have panels, keep the panel to a meaningful size. Make sure everybody is actually going to talk about the topic that people have come to listen to them talk about, and get moderators for the panels that actually know how to keep everything focused on what's providing value for the audience.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think keeping the costs down. I'm okay going to a lesser hotel to have a conference. Totally fine, because I'm not there to. It's not a vacation for me. It is a learning experience, and it's a vacation for some. I mean, obviously, we've been to some conferences in San Diego, and the reason a lot of people go there, especially from Denmark and cold places, is because it's a nice, warm, sandy beach to be on for a while. So a vacation spot does turn into more attendance. However, in those conferences that I've attended, the sessions, no one's in them. They're all out at the beach. So that's a problem. So again, getting back to what the conference is about, what the talks are about. They need to figure that out and get that. I think a committee together that is our industry people that said these are the hot button topics that'll bring people in and focus on those. And you're right, Rosemary. The moderators is a big problem. When you just ask a person that was sitting at a desk at a large OEM or an operator, and that's their day job is running this thing, and then you ask them to be in front of this group of people and to hold this panel discussion, that's not their expertise. They may not be that good at it, and it just leads to this kind of wishy-washy discussion that doesn't really go anywhere. And I think you and I have been on seen too many of those, and we're like, oh, that's a shame. If they had a good moderator here, there'd be a lot more information coming out of it because the panel people up on the dais there are smart. They have information in their head. You need to extract it out. You need to give them the opportunity to speak their knowledge and get out of the way. The best moderators are the ones you don't remember. Those are the best. And sometimes we just don't have that. It's hard, right? If you and I speak a lot on YouTube and the internet and on podcasts, it's hard, right? It's not an easy thing to do.
And I feel I would be unfair if I didn't mention there are quite a few good Australian conferences, but none just focused on wind, as far as I can recall. Anyway, there's the Clean Energy Council does some good events, and I am kicking myself kind of about not going. I don't have the energy to go to another one next week. So there is that one. There's Smart Energy Council also does good events, and there was one called All Energy, which is pretty good too. But they're all like more broad. Can't kind of get into the technical stuff. And then the other one. It's not a conference. It's a event, but the Everything Electric show that I've done a couple of times from the guys from Fully Charged show. Yeah, they're incredibly audience focused, and they take great care in making sure they get good moderators and they get a lot of YouTubers to come and present because they know how to make it fun for the audience. And I mean, they're not appealing to a professional audience. They're appealing to just people who like cars, like home electrification. And I mean, the exhibitions there are fantastic, but so are the presentations. And I think that's a pretty good example of how, like, why can't it be more like that for professionals too? Like, we could also enjoy ourselves and learn a lot.
Rosemary, this has been great. I'm glad you gave us the post-exhibition conference data dump because I think we all have been thinking this the last couple of years about these conferences we've attended and haven't vented. And so I think we hit you at just the right time.
Yes, I'm feeling good. I got through it, but yeah, you definitely did catch me at the right time if you wanted a big rant.
Well, thanks, Rosemary, for being on the podcast. We love having you as one of our co-hosts, and we'll see you next week.